So what are we going to be talking about, right? Superheroes?
Superheroes and their powers and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Do we have an introduction?
We're about to have one.
Okay, we got to have a song. So let's do the song right now. You ready?
No, but I've never let that stop me before.
Okay, you do it then.
La la la. The song of the podcast is starting now.
All right, now what I'm going to do in editing is I'm going to sing over that, and it's going to be like the most awesome thing you've ever heard.
Excellent.
Except not.
I'm ready for that.
All right, so the whole podcast thingy here, I'm Edward Van Winkle, and this is Hokius.
Hokius.
Hokius?
It's a soft O.
All right.
Just call me Hawk.
Hawk. We're going to be talking about superheroes, superhero powers, and how they relate to writing novels and novel writing and all of that stuff. So what kind of superheroes are you talking about?
Oh, any kind of superheroes, really. I've only seen superheroes done in novel form once in Brandon Sanderson's series, The Reckoners.
Yeah. That's interesting that you brought that up. I have never seen superheroes in a novel, and that's strange to me. You would think that it would be an okay format for superheroes to be in.
I think that part of the issue is that superheroes are such a spectacle kind of thing where you want that visual to be there, and it's just not the same necessarily when you describe it in writing.
I guess so, yeah, but we still have like apocalyptic events and stuff in writing, and we still have explosions and fast-paced action scenes. You'd think that maybe we could bring superheroes into that. It wouldn't be such a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I guess you would think that.
Yeah.
It may just be that they were already in the comic books and everybody said, it's a comic book thing. I don't need to worry about that.
Right. Well, maybe we could, maybe that's unexplored territory for future novelists.
Could definitely be.
Maybe there's a niche there that's unfilled. So, the whole idea of giving a superhero superpowers is almost cliche now, isn't it? You've got stuff like One Punch Man just making fun of the cliche. What would be something that novelists need to watch out for if they're going to apply the superhero ideas to a novel?
Well, one of the big thing, obviously, is the powers that are involved, which is something that translates to science fiction and fantasy as well, of course.
Yeah.
Again, this is something Brandon Sanderson has actually written a lot about, and I've read a lot about, and it's probably formed a good deal of my thinking on the subject. One of the things you really got to be aware of is how those superpowers are going to affect your story.
Yeah.
One of the things that we see in some stories is that some superheroes or supervillains are just so powerful. You see this in with Superman, or you see it in Thanos in the more recent movies, where they're so powerful where defeating them kind of requires plot holes to be created.
Yeah.
Or other random MacGuffins. And that could be a little bit irritating.
You bring up an interesting point there that, you can have a superhero or supervillain who is just way too out of scale with their power. But if you bring up, do you watch Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super?
Dragon Ball is one of the animes I have not gotten into.
Oh, man. Well, I'll tell you, what they've done with that is in Dragon Ball Super, which is past Dragon Ball Z, they've put them at the level of the gods with their power level. And it's literally just called power levels, so you can judge everything by that. But they scaled it up very slowly at first, and so they were like 100 or 1,000 or whatever, and in the Frieza saga, this is a meme, it's over 9,000.
Right.
That might have just been the Saiyan saga. But now they're like in the hundreds of millions or billions, and it's just like ridiculous. And yet the writer of that still seems to be able to keep a balance between the good guys and the bad guys. Even some of the really underpowered characters seem to make up for their power loss or, lack of power by using their wits or special abilities. So I think it's all a matter of not giving too much of a range to a single character.
That is absolutely true. I was thinking about that a little bit when I was thinking about this topic earlier. One of the superheroes I hate, as I have already mentioned, well, I don't hate, but I find less compelling is Superman.
Yeah.
Because he's got just about every power already.
Right.
And you can look at someone like Wolverine, not to make this a Marvel versus DC issue, because obviously Marvel has their own issues and DC has some other superheroes that are a little bit more compelling. But you look at Wolverine and he's got the same kind of thing going on where he's really, really, really hard to kill.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have the other super range of powers, so he's a little bit more compelling.
Right.
There's ways to deal with him and to counter him, such as his bones are covered with metal, so if he faces off against Magneto, he can be controlled that way. Whereas with Superman, it pretty much always comes down to, well, we got to use kryptonite.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you have to narrow the range of the character's abilities so that you don't have someone who can just do everything just from the beginning.
And basically what they end up doing with Superman every time he comes into a conflict is finding a way to limit his range of abilities. Oh, well, here's this color kryptonite and he can't fly or, whatever. So they realize the need for that in the story. They just, I don't know. I think Superman probably got out of hand. He probably started out with just a handful of powers because the way the thing goes, he can leap a tall building,
right?
Deflect a bullet, etc. So he maybe had limited powers to start, and some of the creators and writers kind of expanded those too far, and now they have to bring them back in.
Right, and then you end up with like Deus Ex Machina kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Where it's just like, where did that crap come from? Yeah, the plot holes get really wacky at that point.
Exactly.
Well, do you think we'll ever see a novelist create like a really good superhero series, or do you think that's going to stay in the comics range and the movies range?
Anything's possible. I have a hard time thinking we'll ever see a novelist. Well, maybe not ever. Ever's a long time, but in the near future, I have a hard time thinking that any novelist will be able to come up with a superhero that will be able to grasp the imagination the same way that the ones we see in comic books and movies have.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to remember also that a lot of these comic book heroes have been around for decades at this point, and the movie heroes are largely based on the comic book heroes.
Yeah.
So for a book hero to reach that same level would almost require someone to have that character around and being written about for decades to reach that same level anyway.
Well, they could reach that level far off in the future. It wouldn't be immediate.
Right.
But yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So what you're telling me is you're not planning that novel anytime soon.
It's not on my list right now, but
All right.
It could be now that we've kind of shoved that thought into my brain.
It's an interesting possibility. I'm thinking about it myself now, but I've got so many projects. It's the plate's too full.
Exactly.
Yeah. We had one big problem with superheroes there in a novel. Well, two big problems. The first was visualization and whether it would fit the format. But the second was limiting the range of the evil villain or the superhero. Is there a third? It's a nice round number, 3.
It is a nice round number. Let's see. Off the top of my head, I would think that part of the difficulty would be maybe coming up with some... a lot of the things you'll see with the biggest superheroes are the memorable costumes, right?
Yeah.
So you got Superman he's got the tights and they're blue and the red and the symbol. And for Spider-Man, of course, the Spider-Man suit, etc., etc.
Yeah.
with a novel, it's harder to get that same level of visual identification going on. You can put them on the cover, but it's not the same as seeing it on page after page after page.
Right, that brand is hard to build, yeah. But would you say, because I just thought of something, would you say that the Animorphs, did you ever read those?
I may have read one of them a long time ago. I'm familiar with the existence of the series.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, the Animorphs might be superhero, because they had this ability to turn into different animals or aliens or whatever. Then they had different abilities when they did that. So in a way, you could call that a superhero, but it's not the traditional DC Marvel superhero.
Well, that raises the question of what is a superhero? Because
exactly.
If, for example, you even go look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now, you've got people who were transformed by science. You've got people who use scientific gadgets to empower themselves. You've got people who are just really freaking good at their jobs. You've got a wizard who the weird thing about Doctor Strange in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that he's a wizard, and all of his powers come from magic, basically, but they do look science fiction-y. So he kind of stays away from magic and looks more science fiction-y to kind of blend in with everyone else.
Yeah.
But if you look at what his powers are described as, it's just magic. And if you can define magic, anyone who uses magic as a superhero, well, then you're looking at Harry Potter and everyone else as a superhero.
Right. Yeah, could Harry Potter be considered a superhero? That's a really interesting question. But what makes a superhero a superhero? Is it the fact that they have a power that nobody else does? So if that's the case, then if we were to take Dragon Ball Z again, nobody really in Dragon Ball Z is a superhero because everyone else has that power or the potential for that power. And in Harry Potter, we've got a whole bunch of wizards. So are they not a superhero for that reason, because that power is so ubiquitous?
That is an interesting question. Obviously, uniqueness is not necessarily a concern, because again, even within just the MCU, you have Iron Man and War Machine are basically the same.
Yeah.
They have slight differences on how they do things, but they're two guys who fly around in a suit and shoot lasers and bombs at people.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for at least rarity. If everybody was using the Iron Man suits, then obviously that would be it would stop being a superpower. If you go look at Star Trek, everyone has the phasers. Everyone has that technology, so that technology no longer makes you a superhero. It's just that's what everyone uses.
Yeah, it's like Gundams. You're not a superhero if you have a Gundam, but Iron Man is a superhero because he has his suit. It's the same thing.
Right. I think that's a reasonable kind of description, is unique or extremely exceptionally rare abilities.
So what about like people in books who have been changed by radioactive stuff? Does that make them a superhero? I guess it does.
I think it would depend on how they were changed. If they were changed into a random radiation poisoned person, probably not.
Well, yeah, but if they were given like telepathic or telekinetic powers, then that would.
Yeah.
But we don't describe them as superheroes. Is it because of their actions? Is it because they don't go out and do awesome human life-saving things?
Could be. Another thing that defined at least the early generations of superheroes was that they were constantly battling crime.
Right.
They weren't always necessarily battling supervillains, but they were battling crime, and there just happened to be some supervillains who committed crimes. Not everyone's goal was to destroy the universe. They wanted to rob a bank.
Yeah.
And so they would invent, some octopus tentacles to help them with that or something like that, So that's another thing that you could use to define that. It could also just be that the characters in books that we've seen that we might describe as superheroes that aren't called superheroes is, again, just because, well, superheroes is the realm of a comic book, not of a book, so we don't call them superheroes even if they fulfill the same role as a superhero.
Yeah. Because you were saying they go and fight crime and they have one unique ability that nobody else has. And I'm remembering this whole series that I read at one point that had a Scottish detective I think he was Scottish, or maybe just his sidekick was Scottish. Basically, his friend died in a war and then just like haunts him and continuously talks to him in his head. And so he has this ability to talk with his friend, but he's also a detective, so he solves crimes and does all that stuff. And it's just like, that sounds like a superhero now that I think of it.
A little bit.
But he doesn't have a cape.
And that could also be, I mean, the cape is a pretty iconic feature of superheroes, at least, originally. Not so much the new generation, the MCU. Though if you go to the DC side, you'll still see Batman and Superman have their capes. You wouldn't expect to see them without them.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a niche available if anyone wanted to write it for a satire on the superhero format in novel form.
Probably so, especially if you were willing to call it superhero and really lean into it.
Right. And possibly even serious works. I mean, it does seem like that's just an area that's wide open.
I agree.
Well, I think that wraps it up pretty well. So we had 3 or 4 things there, and who knows what the summary is, because I can't remember the whole conversation, but we have been 2 people talking on a podcast that is yet to be named, and how often are we going to do this? Every once in a while?
That sounds about right. Yeah, every once in a while.
Had a good time, and everyone will hear us the next time we do this.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.